Hi, welcome to Inspiring You with Sylvia Yu. I'm thrilled to have Mimi Chan on the show today. Mimi is an entrepreneurial marketer with over 20 years of experience at Fortune 500 companies, including Amazon and AT&T. She studied economics at Stanford, earned the American Marketing Association's first Effie Award for multicultural marketing. Mimi is a very gifted speaker and active in the community, and she co-founded Christians at Amazon and volunteered at TEDx Oakland. Hi, Mimi. So great to have you here.
Hey, Sylvia. I'm super delighted to be here with you together. It's actually one of the things I've been looking forward to the most.
You're so beloved, Mimi, wherever you go. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today with your career? And just share a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Sure. When I first graduated from Stanford, there's a couple of different paths that I could have taken, right? A more traditional consulting path. And instead, I actually went into a leadership program at AT&T. And so in that program, you have a chance to explore different career paths, different rotational assignments over the course of 3 years. But within my second year, I took a role doing marketing for what was back then seemed really advanced, like internet products, and then became mobile after that. And I just found that marketing was something I so loved that I never even moved on to my third rotation. I just took that rotation and I ran with it. And so from there, I advanced my career actually pretty fast. I moved into mobile and started to do a lot of multicultural segment marketing, especially looking at younger generations, Hispanic, African American, like all these different marketplaces. As I did that, I started to learn more about how the larger business ran and the ways in which we could meet needs differently for those customers, and then became a director by the time I was 30, which is one of the youngest, right, in our company at that time. That we can talk about this later. Like that then shifted quite a bit. And eventually, I ended up moving over to Amazon. I had a brief break where I really just analyzed, like, what is I want to have? Like, what's the purpose of the work that I want to do? And I got drawn into Goodreads and then into Amazon Books. I've had a lifelong love of reading, and I was looking for just more purpose, both for me personally, whether it's intellectually, spiritually. I was looking for all those things to come together so that I felt like where I was called to was something that fulfilled all different modes of how I operated, not just one piece of who I was. And I found that at Amazon. And so I spent the last 8 years at Amazon, including working at Goodreads. Most recently, and today, I work leading events for Amazon Books. So those are things like Prime Day, as you know. So we sell. When I first started that in that role 2 or 3 years ago, we were selling about $2.5 billion in books through these events, and now we sell almost $5 billion. And so we've grown that business quite a bit in the few years that I've been there. And I think one of the reasons is because I've been able to feel like I can exercise like the fullness of everything that I have and the full creativity and the full like authority, right? Like we're talking about in building and creating something new at Amazon. And so that's been a joy. And then I think that in the next season, I would love to continue going down like new paths because I found that to be some of the most fulfilling work that I've done.
What was the secret to your success? You've increased revenue by quite a bit there. What would you say was the secret sauce?
There's a phrase in our team that, and it goes back to day one thinking, which is very Amazonian, right? Which is also similar to how someone like Elon Musk thinks about first principles. And the way we phrase it in our team is we are just radically dissatisfied with what we have today. So radical dissatisfaction doesn't mean that you dislike what you're doing. It means that you know that there's the potential for so much more, and you're not going to be limited by what is, but you're going to reimagine what could be. And so when you feel like you have the authority and freedom to do that, suddenly the things that, that you feel, well, things can only be this way. This is only as much as this can grow. All those barriers just seem to disappear. And so in this last iteration of like who I've been in my career, it's been learning to reimagine, like being able to like take such control of your role that you can reimagine it entirely. And at one point I remember our VP came up to me and she's like, "You're perfect for this role. How are you so perfect for this job?" I can't imagine. And she was like, they were talking to my old bosses and like, where have you been hiding her? Right. And the thing is that my old boss used to call me a unicorn. And the thing is
You are.
the opportunity, right? Like how you seize the opportunity is the secret, really, because I didn't pick that role because it was necessarily something that I felt like I wanted to do more than what I was already doing. What was the key of that role was that I felt that there was leadership that I could trust, leadership that was really going to support my vision, leaders that would be sponsors, not just mentors. And then I also could see that it gave me a greater depth of scale and exposure to things that I had not done before. And so seeking those kinds of opportunities, being open to things that are going to make you uncomfortable, but knowing that, in that uncomfortableness, you can uncover something new about yourself, about the business, about the customer, and just leaning hard into that. So we spent a lot of time early on when I took that role diving into the full end-to-end experience for the customer, the end-to-end business. And we just questioned everything. So that's part of what I mean when I say we're radically dissatisfied. We questioned everything. Why does this have to be this way? Does it really need to be that way? And as you start to ask those questions, all the opportunities just open up. And I think the other secret to being able to have that level of growth is really just the strategic alignment with all the different stakeholders and people that you work with. So I spent a lot of time building relationships, a lot of time building trust with my leaders, a lot of time presenting things not as problems but as opportunities. And if you do it in a way that you can bring people along, then it's easy for people to feel like you're saying that my work is bad and I'm failing and that they get defensive. But if you open it as, hey, let's reimagine together what's possible. And I want to support you in that. And what can I do to unblock things for you and make you shine? Then suddenly everyone's on board to change. And that willingness to change is pretty rare. But if you can get that buy-in, then you can accomplish a lot.
So before you were in this unicorn role as a unicorn, what were some of the dots that connected for you that prepared you and shaped you and gave you the critical thinking skills? Because that's not something we were raised with, as Asian dutiful daughters, right? And thank goodness we didn't grow up with rote learning. But yeah, tell me
Yeah.
about how did the dots connect for you?
I think there's two different things I would point to. One, I remember at one point an old boss telling me we were on a call together and I realized something. I was like, oh, that's aspirational. That for what they want to do, we should be going after this age target because if we get that age target, everyone else will aspire to be like that. And I just kind of like very quietly was like, oh, just like kind of leaned in and whispered it to him. Why are you telling me? Like, you need to speak up and tell everybody else on the call. And so back to what you were saying earlier about giving people a voice, like he gave me like he just kind of like helped me like the light bulb turn on, like, oh, like when I have ideas, like I have the authority to speak those out loud. I have the authority to make those things happen, right? So it was like a mind shift, like a slight but really important mind shift of realizing how important it is to speak up and to have thought leadership and to have ownership. And if you're the one advancing those ideas, not to your boss, but like to the decision makers, then you're going to be able to, like, again, to your point, like kind of like connect those dots to making real change in the business. The other pieces are, as you're doing that, um, I think it's easy sometimes to avoid conflict. And I've learned to basically embrace conflict. Really great book for this, which is Difficult Conversations. But if you avoid conflict, then if you don't agree with somebody, you're going to back down. Even if you think or know that your idea is right, you're going to back down. But if you embrace conflict and you know how to handle it positively and in a way where even if you don't agree, you can like come to a meeting place of alignment, right? You can still disagree, but then be committed to each other in your campaign and your shared goals. So learning how to do that well, having really frank discussions, direct discussions, where you're not putting anyone again on the defensive, but where you recognize in people like where people stand, where you have alignment on what the facts are, where you are respecting people's feelings. I know that like in business, you think to yourself, like this is all like in your head, right? It's just intellectual exercise when you do work, but it's not true. I think every time that I've ever failed at work, it's because of relationships. It's because of communication. It's because of those feelings that like rise up in people and come in conflict with each other. So really learning how to handle conflict, I think has been one of the most important things and keys to success in my career later on. And then the last thing, like how do you come up with these ideas or like how do they become formed? A lot of it is just extreme context. We all know top leaders, right? Whether it's Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, they spend a majority of their time just reading. What they're doing is they're getting context of what's going on in the world, what's going on in the business, what is happening right now today with customers. So I think all of us needs to be spending a lot of time getting greater context. And then you're able to come to your leader and be like, hey, here's something that you didn't know, but that's actually really important. And that positions you well, again, for as a thought leader that they will listen to and want to invest in your ideas.
Oh, great wisdom, Mimi. Back to the conflict. What if you're in a very heated situation? What would your advice be? And have you ever bungled it? If you can share. I doubt you've ever bungled anything
No,
because
I bungled it a
I
lot.
no, you're so calm and you're unflappable. But yeah, any advice? Is there a silver bullet? Is there hope for someone like me who gets I'm a hot tamale, a hot pepper personality?
Oh my gosh. I'll give you two examples. One where I failed and one where I feel like it was pretty successful. Earlier on in my career, I hired somebody and she was very experienced, probably more experienced than me, which everyone tells you as a leader, you should hire someone who has like a deeper level of experience than you that can really bring something to the table, and then you just lift them up, right? But this person ended up to be someone very toxic. She would talk about everybody, not just behind their back, but like publicly where people could hear her talking about people. And she was also even talking about like her dissatisfaction with me as a manager. And I was not a perfect manager. So like some of that dissatisfaction was
None of us
deserved.
are. Yeah, none of us.
But the way she was handling it was causing a lot of division across our team, not just
Oh,
our team, but
yes,
other
yes,
teams.
understand.
And people would come and share this with me, but I wasn't sure how to handle it. And if I talked to her about it, she would just deny it. And so what happened is that her toxicity started to cause people to like quit our team, led to people having like open conflict. There was actually even someone who just went on leave of absence. And because like she didn't want to, like it was just so toxic that it was affecting her, like mentally, her mental health. I really just failed to address with her like what her like her baseline dissatisfactions, right? Like there's an element of this of she had some real concerns and actually addressing those as my employee, right? As my team in order to make her more productive and successful and happy in her role. And then there was also the piece of addressing where she was not doing things right, right? And how she was turning the team into such a negative environment that I basically didn't know how to do. I just didn't have a grid for how to do that at that time in my career. And ultimately what happened was that she she kind of drove our team to a point where leaving she ended up leaving and eventually I ended up getting demoted in that job in part because of how badly I handled that conflict within the team and because it then also affected like the work and our ability to deliver. And so again, that's what I'm saying, like when I think about where I've had the deepest failures, it's in relationships. It's in not handling those relationships well, losing trust. And so that's an example where like I epically fail at that.
But it became a superpower because you're a relationship dynamo. I mean, you really know how to cultivate relationships, Mimi. That's really your gift, your great gift. And so it must have been a milestone for you, right? To learn from that failure. Yeah. Please go on.
Yeah, no, you're right. I had to, and the thing, like, you're right. One of my superpowers is the ability to earn trust very fast, very,
Absolutely.
very
I see
fast.
that.
And, but it's because I learned. And so, a story from a more recent role within Amazon, there was a gentleman, and a whole team actually that I was working with. And it was a product team, it was a team of engineers. And we had some agreements about what we should be doing with the product. Because of that, there was some friction where the leader of that team pretty much blamed me for some of the things that was happening uh and there was again like a negative turn to the campaign. And so I was like, we need to stop this, like we need to cut this off right now, because if I've had that experience where I just let it linger, right, and go on. I was like, no, now when I see something like that happening, I like it's immediate. Like, oh, I heard that you said something. Let's talk about it. What is happening? Why are you saying that? Right. So I set up time with him and he brought in one of his engineers to talk. He's like, yeah, I think we need to talk, the three of us together. And so we talked, we resolved the piece that was the product issue, like the challenge is the disagreement about what we should do. We resolved that piece. And then he's like, okay, well, we're done here. And he got up to leave. I was like, no, we are not done, because the
Yeah.
interpersonal conflict
Oh,
still
that's
remained, had not been
yeah.
addressed.
Glad you.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, no, actually, I still need to talk with you. Let's talk. And so we let the engineer go. And then we had a direct conversation about his leadership style, the things that he was saying, that the desire for him to come to me directly, right? Don't say these things behind my back. Like, tell me directly so that I can change. Help me, like, help me to become a better leader for you. And after we had that conversation, that team actually became one of my favorite teams. And they actually, like, they would like invite me to go to lunch with them, and it became such a better like relationship. But it was because we didn't ignore like all those interrelational tensions that existed. If we had done that, we probably would never become really comfortable with each other. But after that, we could be friends, even though we didn't agree about how we handled it at the time. But because we aligned that, we recognized the ways we didn't handle it right, we reconciled and apologized for it, and then we charted a path to how we wanted to interact better. And that made a world of difference with that team. And so it's like a very small example, but your life every day is filled with examples like that, where you have an opportunity to reset or put the relationship on a different path. And so every time you say something or you make a different decision, the way in which you do it, the way in which you bring people into alignment as you're doing it, is extremely important. I think if you can get that front end piece right, then all the execution will just speed up and go so much faster afterwards. And I mean, that goes back to, that book, that Covey book, like Speed of Trust. That is basically what that is. And so I think just learning the hard way of like what not to do. And then now I embrace just a completely different style of how I communicate when there's difficult challenges. And also like the way in which I build networks is also different. I think in the past I felt afraid of, if I'm like building a relationship with somebody, there's like I owe them something, they owe me something, there's like a quid pro quo. It became a
Mhm.
very transactional sense of like business relationship. And over time I realized that is a very
Mhm.
simplistic way to treat business. A lot of business is just so much more complex than that. And you and I both know that a lot of business comes out of relationship, right? Do
So
I trust you? Do I know your capabilities? Am I willing to vouch for you, right? And so a lot of times now, even when I'm building my network, I think of it as how can I help this person? And it takes a lot of the transaction. For me, it takes a lot of the transaction out of it, because it's no longer the sense of like, oh, I'm gonna like, they want something from me, but of a more of a, oh, I want to do something for them. I want to in some way help elevate them, lift them up.
yes,
And it's the same
yes,
way with like everyone on my team. I think early on there's a sense of like you need to speak up for yourself and tell people what you've done. And there is a place and a time for that. But I also find that the more you elevate other people, like, hey, we as a team accomplished this, and this person had such high ownership, and their idea was so creative on this that they were able to double the results. And that's the reason why, you're seeing this over here. Being able to like do that, to like share the wins with other people and elevate them up, has actually become like, again, like one of the best ways to build results. When I think about how we got from 2.5 to almost 5 billion, a lot of it was like encouraging and opening up the doors for other people to also be able to be creative, to change how they were doing things, and then recognizing and lifting them up in that. And that then encouraged them to take even more risk, right? And then encourage other people on other teams to take even more risk. And now everyone's willing and ready to change. And so when I think about it, like, those are some of the fundamental things that changed about how I do business. When you think about interrelationally, how do you do business?
you transform the culture, really, Mimi,
Yes.
and it's a generous spirit, and it does flow back to you as long as you're not giving to get, as you
Yeah.
said, as long as it's not transactional in the
Right.
motivation. Yeah, I very much resonate with that and appreciate
Mm.
your honest sharing. So, Mimi, can you share some other challenges? What are two other challenges that you've overcome? And what would you have wanted your younger self to know that you learned later on through, a longer road so that we can share with the audience?
Yeah. You mentioned like younger people. One of the things that almost no company teaches you is how to go from being an individual contributor to being a leader of individual contributors. And the reason I point this out is because a lot of times that's where you see managers fail, is trying to make that transition. You are an overachiever, you get exceeds on every performance review, you know the business inside out, so you are primed for promotion, right? And so then you get promoted, and suddenly everything that you did before doesn't seem to be able to get you to your next promotion, right? I think a lot of us have experienced that. And so what I would say around this is that, again, one of the things that like was hard for me, and I think that in time I've become just much better at least I hope I've become much better, is not just like coaching someone how to do their work, but teaching someone how to be strategic, teaching someone how to have thought leadership, helping someone to realize that a promotion is actually only like, I would say not even 25% of what you deliver. The majority of your promotion comes down to your leadership capabilities, comes down to your ability to build strong relationships with leaders and communication up to leaders, to be able to get ideas across clearly and compellingly, convincingly with data, to do it in a concise manner, and then being able to bring again fresh ideas that deliver a completely different level of value than what you're already doing. And so what's gotten you so far into your job, most of the time to get to the next level won't get you to the next level. You actually have to basically recreate yourself every time you want to reach the next level of what you want to accomplish. And so that constant like reimagining, recreation, you see a lot of artists do it, right? You see a lot of like actors, actresses, musicians, you see them have to like recreate their brand, recreate like their musical styles. Even Tiger had to like learn a new swing, right? In order to become more successful. And so I think what happens a lot for us is that we keep relying on what's worked before,
True.
and we don't invest the time in developing the next strategic level skills that will actually get you to where you want to be next. So it's really easy to get like heads down. I'm just going to focus on like what I can do. And then we hit this ceiling, whether it's a bamboo ceiling because we're Asian, or a ceiling because we're a woman, right? Like there's so many ceilings for us.
Yeah.
And we hit the ceiling and we're like, we don't know how to break through it. And in a way, like your sponsors can tell you, like, can give you some tips. You can ask. If you just go do a 360, they'll tell you what's wrong. But the problem is that even if they tell you what's wrong, they can't tell you quite how to get out of it, right? How to fix what's wrong. They can tell you you're not being strategic enough. They can tell you you're not getting enough face time in front of leadership. They can tell you that your role doesn't have enough scale. But then very rarely do they tell you, oh, well, this is what you need to do in order to get more exposure, to get more scale, to get more whatever, right? You have to figure that out for yourself. And so, again, I think that's where having greater context is really helpful. Like having insatiable curiosity, being radically dissatisfied, right? All of those are principles that can guide you to change, to basically get to the next level so that you're not just resting on what you already have. And like, this is the other thing actually I'm really against. I remember early in my career, people were like, just pretend, like, just act like you kind of know what you're doing until you know what you're doing. And I am adamantly against faking it till you make it. I'm like
Yes. Yeah.
adamant because you're going to get found out. One, you're going to get found out. And two, actually, no one expects you to know everything. Top leaders don't know everything. That's why they're constantly asking you questions about your business, right? They just don't know. And no one expects them to, is the
Mm,
thing. We put such high standards on ourselves.
mm.
No one expects that. What they expect is for you to be able to ask smart questions and to make smart decisions. And if you can get more context and more insight and can get ahead of the trends and see what's coming down the road, then your decisions are going to be smarter than other people's.
Okay, excellent. Wow, what a masterclass in leadership. You have so much confidence. I really admire that about you. And you're just, yeah, very balanced. How did you become this way? Like what did you go through and to become so a unicorn because you're so accomplished, Mimi, and you're so beloved. I mean, have you gone through hardships and overcame that? I mean, what's the secret to your superpowers?
I would say that part of it is part of it for me is like my deep faith. And everybody has a source of like where their center is. For me, that happens to be like a deep love of God. And what that means is that I spend a lot of time like praying and fasting and thinking. And for other people, it might be meditating, right? but time away from everything else where you can just recenter and ask the hard questions about what is what is your purpose and your calling? What is it about maybe whatever you're working on, whatever dilemma or problem that you're trying to solve? Like, what are the deeper layers and issues behind that, right? And you're seeking, like, basically like a deeper insight. And for me, a lot of that comes from like a spiritual grounding. And when I have that, I think like that's the center of like the calm and the peace, because when you have that like that assurance, that certainty that I'm grounded. I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I know this is where I'm supposed to be. I know this is the job I'm supposed to have. I know these are the people I'm supposed to lead. Then even if things go a little sideways or a lot sideways, you can still have a lot of peace. Because I can think of roles I've had before where if I had to kill projects, where I've had to kill products, where I had to like sign off on like multi tens of millions of dollars of loss. And you would think those would be the stories of failure
Oh,
where
yeah.
I'm like, oh, my career crashed. But actually, many times that's actually where my career advanced, is
Ah,
when something like that, a campaign or a product failed. But it was because there was a calmness of like, oh, I'm certain that this is what we're supposed to do. I'm certain that at the time that we started this product, it was the right thing. But by the time we actually came to launch, the window had passed. The technology had advanced too quickly. But because I was able to explain to leadership, like, this is what led to those decisions, and I'm confident and sure about each of those decisions along the way because I'm grounded in like the assumptions and the understanding at the time of why we made those. And I brought them along, right? Like, you have to bring people along and like what goes on so that by the time you get to the destination, you realize the window has passed. What you get out of it is like, well, that was actually a really great learning. And actually the fact that we were able to get to that learning faster and kill the product before we lost even more money, like that actually won me an award from my CMO, but you don't like, to your point, like, you're not panicking because you've spent the time, like the internal quiet time of understanding kind of like where you are, what your purpose is, what the meaning is behind what you're doing, and the sense, and when you feel confident, like, this is where I'm supposed to be, like this is in line with my calling and my purpose, then again, like, you can turn that around into something that is still a success, even if it may in some ways fail. And so it's a lot of it's just perspective, right? And I get that a lot where people will be like panicking. Actually, recently, a number of people was like, "How do you stay so calm? What do you do? Like, we appreciate how you stay so positive." And part of that may be just how I'm made, but the other piece too is because I've seen so many of these past experiences as well,
yeah.
where I failed in different ways, where products or campaigns have failed, but I've seen like how you can get out of them or what can positive things can come out of them. All of that has led to a point where there's no reason to panic. There's always a solution. There's always a path that you can take forward. There's always someone who knows something more than you that can help you figure out what's happening. And so the just that grit, right? This that sense of like that we are conquerors. Things aren't going to conquer us. We are the ones that are supposed to be
Yeah.
conquering and stewarding and like leading and building. And so the to for us, that's just a playground. It should be just a playground. And sometimes we build something up and then we realize it doesn't work and we have to like take it down to its foundation and then we just build again.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I would add one of your superpowers is love. You genuinely are kind and you care, and
Mm.
that love propels you. And I love that. I love what you said about a transcendent sense of purpose. So, last question. If you had $1 billion, what would you do with it? I mean, would you buy your own island, forget about everyone, or would you want to make a difference? What would you do?
So my current focus is I feel a calling to build a talent pipeline. I feel a calling to build a talent pipeline between the East and the West. But I talk to a lot of Gen Z. I mentor a lot of Gen Z. And one of the things that breaks my heart so much for them is that they're coming out of college. They're so smart. They're so driven. They naturally know how to be creative and to think day one, but they're just not getting opportunity. So many of them are not being able to find jobs, are stuck at home. There's in Japan, there's a term for even a job that's just basically taking care of your parents. That's actually now considered like a job,
Oh, wow.
because they can't find a real job. They can't find a job,
Oh,
and the entry level jobs are disappearing with AI. And so, if I had $1 billion, I would build a talent pipeline that could get every Gen Z employed in the world, because
oh.
that opportunity, right, to like to that's life changing, right, for the rest of their
Mm.
lives. And so setting them on the right path, making sure that they have mentors and sponsors who can lead them and guide them. Ones that I've had that have been so critical to me, like that one person who told me to speak up, if I could take that and just change the lives of this Gen Z generation, then I think like they have the power then to do even more than me.
Thank you for that. It's very noble of you. And one last rapid fire question. If you could meet anyone from history, who
Oh
would it
gosh.
be?
If I could meet anyone from history, you would think I would have thought about this before.
Or let me guess, Jesus. No?
No, actually, no.
No.
I'm gonna meet him someday. I will meet him someday. So like, I don't have to use my free card for that. Free pass. Free pass for that.
Understand. No, that's strategic. That's strategic. Okay, who would you want to
No, listen
meet?
to me about thinking about this. There's so many amazing people in history. You know, I just remembered that there was a missionary that went to Korea. I think like an older female missionary, and her ability to speak about her faith to, I think like the king of Korea is actually part of what turned Korea into a Christian nation. And so meeting someone like that and like understanding like how did you do that? What was it about you that was so convincing? In what way were you able to, kind of like you said, how did you love somebody so well that you changed the whole spiritual like direction of an entire nation? How do you do that? And somebody like that, or even I think of a lot of our founding fathers in like in US, in US history, folks like Ben Franklin, again, like those are people who are like breaking new ground, they're reimagining things, they're thinking day one in a completely different time, and yet they had such vision that some of the things they imagined back then are even now just being created. And so I would love to like pick the brain of like how did you come up with ideas that like are now coming to fruition like 400 years later. How do you do that? So there's just so much, yeah, there's just so many people that are, to your point, just so inspiring in history.
I feel like the two people you picked are what you're walking into or what you will become and do.
Oh,
So that's interesting. That's interesting. Thank you, Mimi. Mimi is an incredible human being. Feel free to reach out to her on LinkedIn. Thank you for watching. And Mimi, we'll definitely talk again. Thank you so much.
it was such a joy, Sylvia. Thank you for having me.
What a blast it was.